Hi friends on YouTube, it's Pete. I'm in my basement. I need a distraction from this COVID-19 chaos that seems to have gripped the United States. I think we have lost our collective minds and I've got to think about something else. So I decided to dig around, see if I could find something to play with. Maybe make a video about. And look what I found. This is an Apple II Plus computer, vintage late 70s, very early 80s probably. This is actually a Bell & Howell version. This was sold into the educational market by Bell & Howell, but it is a, other than the color of the case and the fact that it has Bell & Howell on it, it is exactly an Apple II Plus computer that I purchased new back in the day. So I'm going to see if I can get this thing to start again. And if I can, I'm going to tell you more about it. Okay, when I bought this for about $1,600 as I remember it, which I think was more than 10% of my annual salary at the time. This is what I got, right? Nothing else. Didn't come with a monitor, no permanent storage device. If you really look at what's here, it's very simple. There's a power connection, on-off switch, and there is in fact a video connection here if you had an appropriate monitor to hook it to. If not, if you didn't have an appropriate monitor, then you had to use something like this. I think this was called an RF, some kind of an RF modulator that could convert the digital signal here to a proper signal that old style TV could understand through its antenna, and you could hook this. I'm not sure which of these, one or the other. You could hook directly to your television and get a reasonable looking interface. So let's plug it in, let's power it up. Power in there. I'm going to need something to act as my television. I happen to have an old Apple IIe monitor that's perfectly suitable. We might talk about that later, but there's a simple RCA jack connection. Hook that in there. Let's turn this on. Is that on? See a green light there. So, there we go. Green light. I guess I left the power on a computer. Got a power switch, or power light is on. And here enough, I got an Apple II logo at the top of the screen and a prompt. And if I hit the return key, it's reading the prompt. So it works, which is wonderful. Now, with this thing, you got some manuals with it, as I remember. They were basically, what I remember getting is the Apple II reference manual, which kind of tells you about the internals and the operating system, all kinds of really gory details that you would never get with a computer today. Then there was the AppleSoft tutorial. AppleSoft was kind of a basic-like language that came built in with the computer and let you program it to do some basic functions. So that's a getting started guide, and then here's the actual reference manual for the AppleSoft basic language, and that's what you got. If you went about trying to write a program in this and you wanted to save it, you had to save it to a audio tape, the old cassette audio tapes. I don't even have one around that I can show you anymore. Tied to just an old audio cassette tape player, reader, player, recorder. You had to record and play, obviously. And what it would try to do is take that digital-based program that you'd written and write it out through an analog signal to the audio tape. Now, that was very, very, very unreliable. So if it did happen to write it, it may not be able to read it back again. It was very, very fussy. I felt like there was about a 50% success rate, which means it was pointless, right? If you don't have close to 100%, there's no point in even doing it. So it didn't take long before I was out to spend another $500 to get myself one of these things. Might have been $550 now that I think about it. But this is an actual floppy disk drive with the appropriate interface card that would plug into the motherboard of the computer, and it came with the DOS operating system. So the DOS operating system then lets you use that as part of the computer. Well, I dug out the reading glasses and I'm starting to go through the reference manual, just get reacquainted with things. This is entertaining, to say the least. We've got nice chapters here like Approaching Your Apple, with basic specs about it, Conversation with Apples, the System Monitor, Memory Organization, Input, Output Structures, Hardware Configuration, and on it goes. So I'll just share a few things about the basic technology you got here with this bad boy. This sucker was delivered with a 16 KB of standard memory. Now, KB is such a small number that we rarely ever hear it used anymore, but it stands for kilobytes. A KB is 1024. It's a hexadecimal number. And there are 16 times 1024 kilobytes of memory in this, which is, now, way to think of a byte is think of it as a single alphabetic character or a number, right? That can be stored in a byte on a 8-byte or 8-bit computer. And this was, and it still is, an 8-bit computer, right? So it came with 16 KB standard. You're going to be hard-pressed to find anything that has that little bit of memory on it anymore. But it could be upgraded to a massive 64 KB, which was, basically 4 times of the original 16 KB. And within the full 64 KB memory space, that included basically the operating system, right? Applesoft, I'm sure, had to be in there somehow. But, that was the amount of working memory that you were dealing with. The screen itself really worked in 3 different modes. There was a text mode where you were showing characters, right? And that was 40 characters across a line, 24 lines of capability. Then there was a low-res graphics mode and a high-res graphics mode. The low-res graphics mode was basically blocks of color. High-res was down more like a pixel, but the pixel count was very low. And of course, you had to have a screen that would show colors. This one happens to be a monochrome screen. So if you like this video and you'd like me to do more like this, why don't you give me a like and subscribe, and I'll put some more together for you. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me, avoiding the COVID-19 crisis.